The meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. To begin, board member introductions.
Okay, Victoria Jenny, Amy McLaughlin, Mary Colonnade,
Chip Malcolm.
Peter Rose, superintendent.
Peter Coleman, who's trying not to touch his face.
Ken Newseater, failing at that miserably. Mary Gill, Susie Buck, Lorraine Morse,
And ACSD administrators.
Bruce McIntyre, Director of Facilities.
Vicki Wells, Director of Student Services, Brittany Gelman, Business Manager, Caitlin Steele, Director of Teaching and Learning, Jen Roberts, Mary Griffin Principal, Michaela Wizzle, Mary Griffin Assistant Principal. Will's here.
And Will is in back. So we'll begin tonight. I'm starting out because we are starting with the both nomination and election of a board chair. So I am going to open nominations for board chair. Yes.
All right, well, it should come as no surprise to anybody by the fact that I raised my hand for this nomination that I'm not nominating myself and I'm not seeking to return as chair. It has always been my intent to step down as chair before my term came to an end, largely because our unified district is still quite young, and I've been the only chair. So I thought it would be important to be available to the new chair as a resource, but also to the board as a whole in making sure that the role of the chair, no matter who the person is who holds it, as defined in our policies, continues to meet that definition. So I'm going to indulge here a little bit. With that in mind, I'd just like to remind everyone, the board members and the public, that the role of the chair is largely limited to a few areas, to running meetings in accordance with open meeting laws, Robert's rules, and more importantly, our own board norms, appointing committees, signing contracts, and very importantly, acting as a liaison to the superintendent. There are certainly some smaller things in there. And I bring this up not as a reminder to the new chair, but as a reminder to my fellow board members that we operate by consensus, and that reaching consensus requires us all to participate in discussions, do our part in committee, and to be prepared as best we can for our meetings. While I've got the floor, just one more thing. I just want to take a moment to thank my fellow officers, Lorraine and Suzanne, who have provided me with support, as well as being an excellent sounding board, and providing me with criticism when it's been, frankly, very important. And also, the rest of my board members, I just want to say that no matter how challenging our meetings have been, I've really modeled how this board has operated with decorum, with courtesy, and with kindness to one another. And this has really made a big difference. Thank you very much. So now I'd like to nominate Mary Colonnade for chair. I do so looking forward to her collaborative nature, her communication skills, and her perspective. Second.
Thank you. Other nominations for chair?
Really?
Maybe from the floor. Anyone from the floor? All in favor of electing Mary Colonnade as the ACSD board chair, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? You've got it. Thank you.
Thank you all. First and foremost, I want to thank Peter for his first just the way in which he welcomed me onto the board when I first joined, and the leadership that he has shown and the civility that he brings to a public debate and process that I think we are at a place collectively as a nation where we could all appreciate. And so Peter, thank you very much. And I would also like to thank all of the other board members here over the past few years, it has been an honor to be part of this group that is just trying to do the best thing that we can for the kids of this county and of our district. And it has, it's been refreshing to come to this organization and see the passion that our community and our members bring to our debates. And so I hope in some small way to be able to contribute to that in this role. So thank you all very much. And to the staff here, especially Peter and his leadership team, again, over the past couple of years, seeing you all step up in ways when you're called to do more, you do it. And that has been incredibly appreciated by, I know, every single member on this board. And we thank you for what many days goes unnoticed for all that you do for these kids. So thank you very much. So that I believe the next thing that happens, this is what Peter gave me, Robert's Rules of Order book. Do any of you have one? So I will be trying to learn my P's and Q's as much as I can, but I believe the next thing that we need to do is elect a vice chair. So with that, I will be asking for nominations, and I believe Lorraine.
Yes, I nominate Victoria.
Second. Any more discussion or nominations? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Victoria? Thank you. And next, we will be seeking a nomination for clerk. Do I hear any nominations?
Nominate Suzanne.
Nomination for Suzanne.
Second that?
Second by Peter. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Suzanne, thank you very much. I believe next is to appoint a truancy officer, which I believe is...
Connor Sousa.
Great. And we need a second for Connor? No. Great. Connor is appointed. Outstanding. And then...
Connor is currently our
SRO.
Yeah.
School resource officer.
Next is establishing the regular board meeting date and time. We've been meeting every second and fourth Monday, I believe. Open that up for any motion for something different or the same.
The same.
The same.
Second. I'll second.
Second, the same. Great. We will maintain every second and fourth Monday.
You want
Ready to vote on that?
Yeah.
Any other motion?
Okay, whoever moved it.
We have a first and second.
Okay, great.
Great. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Second and fourth Mondays. And next, as we have always in the past, this is a time in which we can allow the public to come and comment. As Peter has consistently led us through this process, it is a public comment time. And at that time, we ask that you please just stand, give your name, and make your comment. At this time, is there any public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Dana Craig. I'm one of 4 language and literature teachers at Middlebury Union Middle School. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be the voice for many of my colleagues tonight. So I'm going to read a letter that was shared with members. Dear members of the ACSD board and our greater ACSD community, we, the undersigned, are reaching out to you to communicate that we do not endorse the proposed plan for the sixth grade implementation at Middlebury Union Middle School for the 21-22 school year. We strongly feel that the non-negotiables that the committee was required to use while designing the proposed reconfiguration will not allow our school to continue maintaining the quality of education that our community has grown to appreciate, celebrate, and expect of moms. We are gravely concerned that the non-negotiables provided to the committee were the driving force in shaping the future of our school.
as opposed to the student's needs, optimal student learning, and middle school best practices. To provide context, the non-negotiables given to the committee were as follows. MOMS would have students in grades 6 through 8. 2, no increase in space at MOMS. 3, no increase in the number of MOMS faculty over the 2021 school year. 4, NYP subject hours must be met. And 5, students must have a choice of language, French or Spanish, in grade 7 and stay in that same language for the remainder of NYP. While there are aspects of the proposal that we feel are positive, such as additional Spanish and French instructors, appropriate student-teacher ratios for language classes, and increased time in physical education and design, we absolutely believe this proposal moves us farther away from what research has proven is best middle school practice, not closer. We take issue with several of the non-negotiables, but the most egregious one is that no new full-time faculty members are being added to MOMS, yet approximately 120 new students will be joining our student body. Without adequate staffing to keep our ratios in balance at MOMS, we cannot faithfully maintain our school as a middle school, which research has clearly shown to benefit students at this extremely vital time in their social, emotional, and academic development. This is because the plan eliminates, in any authentic form, the unique and beautiful thing that is the team, the very thing that makes MOMS a middle school. Without teams, MOM will become a junior high, a model that we abandoned long ago in favor of more progressive middle school practices. A team is a group of students and teachers small enough to build the type of relationships and communities that research shows middle school-age children need most. Middle school children are not just mini high school students. They are in a critical period of intense brain growth, developing self-regulation, conscious decision-making, memory, judgment, and insight. Research shows they need a highly personalized, wrap-around learning environment, frequent meetings with teachers, guidance counselors and administration, teacher advisories, otherwise known as TA, developmentally responsive, and differentiated lessons. In short, they need an environment in which they can be known, and known well. This is what MOMS has now. The true middle school team builds relationships among students and adults, and while the class sizes in the proposed model are reasonable, about 20, the size of the proposed teams will significantly impact instruction and the relationships students, families, and our faculty value. In fact, these teams will not be teams at all, because each team will be the entire grade. This could reach 120 students. A team size of 120 is absolutely not in students' best interests. Simply having a group of 4 teachers instructing the entirety of a grade and calling this a team does not make this a team, as understood in middle school best practice. These will not be teams at all. Even if we were to think that eliminating teams was a viable option, the student's educational experience will be diminished in this proposal due to cohort size. The Vermont State Department of Education agrees that 100 students for most teachers is not a good idea. Vermont's education quality standards, which are guidelines for good teaching and learning in our state that every school district needs to enact, clearly state that the total class roll of a teacher shall not exceed 100 students, except where the specific nature of the teacher's assignment, such as in certain art, music, or physical education programs, is plainly adaptable to the teaching of greater numbers of students while meeting the educational goals of the program. This wording was lifted exactly as stated from the Vermont State Board of Education Manual of Rules and Practices Series 2000 Educational Quality Standards. We believe the state would concur that cohorts of 100 students severely compromises teachers and students' ability to get to know one another well, especially at the middle school level. Students will not receive as much rich and frequent feedback on their work and may not be given as many opportunities to engage in inquiry-based projects and high-level work due to the sheer number of students each teacher is responsible for. Only so much can be accomplished in a given day if there are 100 students on a team, which again is not a team, and the quality of education is diminished. Note, too, that in this proposal there is one special educator assigned to each of these 120-person teams. This also lets down some of our students with the greatest needs. Currently, each of our teams at MOMS has 34 to 40% of our students on specialized instruction plans, that being IEP, 504, and EST. It is no secret that these numbers are increasing. We have more high-need students coming through our doors each year. Think of the impact it would have on some of our most vulnerable students to rely on a single special educator assigned to a 120-person team. Along with middle school best practice, we also believe that the current structure of MOMS clearly represents the tenets of Vermont's Act 77, as evidenced in our commitment to proficiency-based grading and personalization for each student. Much of this good work is accomplished in our current block scheduling structure, which allows students to delve into and sustain focus on higher level and complex projects. By splitting the day into more blocks for each teacher and student, this new proposal significantly reduces the instructional time and learning opportunities in the 4 core content areas called middles: math, language and literature, science, and individuals and societies. It reduces it to 49 minutes for 3 out of the 5 days. This is a 25% loss in middles instructional time, 121 hours lost per middles class for the school year. While the proposed schedule may strive to benefit the whole learner by adding more classes to the school day, recognize there will be significant implications, especially for those students who struggle with executive functioning and anxiety issues and may find this increase in transitions overwhelming and unmanageable. We ask you to please consider the staffing and space non-negotiables put forth in the design of this proposal and provide adequate staffing and sufficient space. If you decide bringing 6th graders to MOMS is in the best interest of students, then help us give students a school that actually functions in their best interest. Let's do it the right way. We are reflective and engaged educators. We welcome and embrace change when children's needs are at the heart of that change. We are proud to work at a school that is noted for its strengths. If you decide that the non-negotiables must stay as they are, please understand that what you will get is not the MOMS that you know now. As we hope you recognize, we are a dedicated and experienced faculty and will do the best job we can every day. However, this does not mean we think it is a good plan. Quite far from it. Signed, Helen Anderson, Darcy Anino, Whitney Barber, Randy Barnes, Denise Berrubi-Mayon, Jennifer Billings, Jan Broderson, Wendy Bouliard, Sandy Solaro, Paul Sherrier, Dana Craig, Liz Cronin, Roger Bruin, Phoebe Doan, Katie Ford, Jan Fraga, Evelyn Gray, Laura Hall, Michael Lawson, Brian Lisco, Michael Lowenstein, Lisa Maggio, Justin Martell, Amy McCarthy, Katie McDonald, Katie McDougall, Allison McNamara, Jeffrey Morawski, Sarah Netto, Janelle Perry-Askew, Pam Quinn, Martha Santamaria, Eileen Sears, and Jean Whiteman. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Yes.
They're going to be surprised because I did not coordinate this with them. And I'm sorry that we're taking some further from our student leaders over here, so I'll try to be brief.
Could you just state your name, sir?
Yeah, my name is Jason Duquette Hoffman. I have a student here at Mary Hogan, a student at Muns, and a student at the high school, and I served with many of you on this and prior boards, so I know what it feels like to be sitting in the seat that you're sitting in right now and hearing what you're hearing. And I wanted to say something tonight because I want to give you a little bit different perspective on what you just heard. I'm very much in support of the move of the 6th grade to the middle school. The reason that I support that is because I think it is an environment that does the best we can do for our kids in this community. And I want to give you an example. On October 15th of this last fall, my daughter Simone was playing soccer in Brandon, and they don't call her a Badger for nothing. She was playing defense in the way that she does. And she had a collision with another player on the other team. That player landed on her head with their knee. Simone came off the field, and we later, since that time, we've been working with medical professionals to respond to the injuries that she sustained. Simone's an avid basketball player and skier. She has not been able to play basketball or ski this year, though she went to every single basketball game and practiced with her team. And during that time, one of her teachers, who's the coach, was able to engage her as an assistant in that process. Simone has damage to her oculomotor nerve, which helps the eyes move so they don't focus together. She missed a grand total of almost 3 weeks of school. She had to take substantial time coming back when she was in school to take time out of classes because everything we do now is on screens. And because her eyes can't focus in the same space now or work together, which she's working on and doing a marvelous job. She had a hard time reading. We were working with pediatric neurology in Burlington to respond to these injuries that she has. And in her assessment with the neurologist looked at her and said, "So, how's school going?" And Simone said, "School's going great. I'm keeping up with my work, my grades are good, all my teachers are on board." And he looked at her, and his jaw hit the floor, and he said, "Kids with the kind of traumatic brain injury that you have don't have that experience. They lose a year." A year. There is exactly one reason that Simone is doing great in school this year and will go on to advance math and Spanish 2 in the high school next year. And that is because this team of teachers knows her well enough to see when she's struggling in class, even when she refuses to admit it because she goes to school like she goes to the soccer. And they can tell her back off. They went out of their way to follow a 15-page protocol to make sure that she had every accommodation that she needed, that they got it right every time, that they checked in with her and with us. I don't even want to begin to try and count the number of emails between myself and my partner and our team of teachers over the course of that time. And I can tell you that the way the middle school operates right now is going to be the reason that my kid can be as successful as she can be in school. There is no greater purpose in that. None.
Thank you, Jason. And Simone, thank you for being here as well, dear. Any other public comments?
Hi, my name is Julie Barry, and I'm representing Jason tonight. If you can indulge, just pretend that Jenny Phelps is standing next to us. And the three of us, together with a lot of our neighbors in Waybridge and friends and neighbors across any community, our broader ACSD community. What it means for us, what it means more broadly, what it means for us as a district. We're doing a lot of thinking and talking and learning about how this can go as a process. And we want to come across, we want to come at this as allies with people from all across our district. We want to come to everyone with sort of focus on what the term that I think the board members us using is being co-problem solvers with our board, because we know what a difficult task this is for them. We know what a difficult task this is for all of us. Amy, Jenny, and I were interviewed a month or two ago by the IED, and since that time we've had more people reach out to us with this same interest, this interest in how can we make this process go as well as it can go for all of the towns in our district and come out of it feeling whole and feeling good. And to that end, we've been listening and talking and thinking and writing. And we have tonight to bring to the board a statement of people across all 7 of our towns who have a strong interest in the deeper public engagement in the facility master plan than what we've been able to experience so far. And what we are hoping for is that we could have guidance from outside our district, guidance of outside facilitation to help bring us to places that we haven't been able to go yet with public engagement. We think that the board has a real chance, especially right now as we're moving into a different phase of this process, to show real leadership in intentionally bringing us together for 2 purposes, both for analytical purposes and for social purposes. Analytical purposes like asking the community to look at ideas, to look at data, to think about information. But social purposes as well, asking our community to come together and build community together and build our school district together in a way that I think maybe you as a board have had a chance to do at your board retreats, to think about how you want to be one board, but that our community really hasn't had a chance to do, to come together, figure out how to be one community. So we are interested in a deeper level of public engagement than what we've had a chance to experience so far.
So we have something to drop with you, which is a statement that we carefully crafted with big hearts and careful eyes. And hopefully it comes across the well-intentioned, good intention that was there in the drafting of that. And we also have the names of people throughout the district who support that. So we will drop that little packet with you when Julie and I sit down, but we want you to know, board, community, we're not dropping it and leaving. We're hoping that you feel the support of the community and wanting to be partners with you on that. And to that end, I would say that there are some supports available should those prove useful, including several people who are willing to fundraise for this, so that in the event that there's not funding available to pay for professional facilitation or whatever resources we would want, the board would want to bring in for support, there are people in the community willing to do some of that fundraising work. So please know you're not alone in figuring out how to pay for a process like that. Also, we've done a little bit of research already on some facilitators that aren't available, so there's a little legwork that's been done on that. And a little bit of looking into what we understand our sibling district in Mountie has been able to do. It's really worth everyone taking time to look at the community engagement page of their website, and you can see the kinds of conversations that the community has been having together, not just in their hub town, but in other towns, and coming together and really listening to each other. So we just feel like the empathy piece of this, someone brought this up at a recent facilities meeting, the chance for people to listen to each other will make us all a little more open-minded and flexible about coming up with solutions. So that's the idea of that. So we're not dropping these documents to you without the offer of continued support for that. So thank you for considering. It's an ongoing, it's a work in progress. We're still getting emails. We're still having people say, I heard about this. We'd like to sign on. Not everyone in the community agrees, and we expected that. But we think everyone kind of deserves the chance to hear from each other in a dialogue process. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any other comments from the public? Thank you all. Appreciate it. Next on the agenda, I think there's some folks in purple t-shirts back there who have been waiting nervously.
So, thanks for coming, and thanks for, our student council wanted to talk with you tonight. It's the first year of student council of Mary Hogan. We have a lot of amazing leaders, but they were chosen by their classmates after giving speeches and have been doing a really great work. They've been working with Shauna Lee, and they're very impressive. She kind of put together the bare bones of the slideshow and they reworked it on her. So they're ready to present. And thank you for coming, and I hope you can come back during the day sometime and see them in action.
Oh, yeah, you turned it on. You did. She knew better. It's still closed on the lens. Is it? Now it's open. It's gonna take a minute.
Okay. Well, I can start off by saying, the kids actually created each of the slides. They created multiple slideshows that they put in Google Classroom for me to look over on a regular basis. I don't always get to them, they're on me a lot, but that's saying I'm proud of. They come up with amazing ideas. They have tremendous courage. At the beginning of the year, in each of the 5th and 6th grades, we presented some lessons on what student leadership was and student voice. And these are the kids that put themselves out there and ran for class representatives and were elected by their peers to be the student voice. So, without further ado, it could be that. Hold on, sorry.
Check the source.
No, of course not.
Thanks, Jen. All right, Peter. Is the mic on? I don't know if you want to check it out. Yeah. Go for it. Yeah.
Step right up.
Hello? Oh, that works, good. We're hearing my own voice. Yeah, good. Thank you so much. So, hello everybody. Our group, as you can see, is Student Council 2019 and 2020. So, we, as said before, were elected by our classmates and peers to be part of this selective group of students who will be the students' voices in general. We're trying to make changes that the students want, so just the teachers aren't just say, this is going to happen now, you have no say. So we take suggestions from other students, and then we take them and bring them to student council, and sometimes we change them, sometimes we don't, because they're not possible. No swimming pools. That's not going to happen. Stop asking. So, I think that, it's time for all of us to introduce ourselves. So, I think... Introduce yourself. Okay, so I'll go first. I'm Peter Conklin. I ran to, because I'm new this year, so I ran to be like part of something and joining a group that will help me like develop socially in this new environment. Done pretty well so far. And I also joined to help make a change at the school. So I think someone else is going to go next. I don't know who.
Just tell us your name and what grade you're in.
I am a Prairie Littlefield and I am in 6th grade.
Real close to the microphone. Right to the microphone. Right to the microphone.
So keep coming and go quickly and say your name and what grade you're in.
My name is Natalie and I'm in 5th grade.
Good job.
Just introduce yourself.
I'm Alice Levisay and I'm in 5th grade.
I'm Sarah Vivier, and I'm in 5th grade.
I'm Greta Sealer and I'm also in 5th grade.
I'm Benda Bishop and I'm in 6th grade.
I'm Caden Hammond, and I'm in 6th grade.
I'm David Dale and I'm in 5th grade.
I'm in Duke. Can you hear that? Okay. I'm in Duke Hoffman. I think I have the longest last name and I'm in 5th grade. I'm Gabe and I'm in 5th grade.
I'm Charlie Reeder and I'm in 5th grade also. I'm Avery Helenshaw and I'm in 6th grade.
I'm Ida Blackwell and I'm in 5th grade. I'm Leah DeGray and I'm in 5th grade. I'm Amelia Bullock and I'm in 5th grade.
Why don't you come up together?
I'm just gonna, Olivia isn't here tonight. I just wanted you guys all to know that Olivia is a part of student council, but she's not here. Yeah.
Just gonna move this over this way so it's easier for you all. Whoa! Caught it.
Nice save.
Thank you. There we go. That's better.
So come up together. And remember, you guys have done this 100 times, right? Just own it. Nice and loud.
So, this is what we are in student council. We are a group of student role models that have been elected by our classmates to help represent the students and their ideas.
We are student leaders wanting to help the school and make a difference.
We are the students' voice.
We are student role models, students and teachers that we can rely on and trust to make good choices.
We are a group of kids trying to help other kids understand the importance of our voice in impacting positive change. So at the beginning of this year, I think we, not student council, but our school got essential agreements, and we build our goals and days around these agreements. So
These are them. We care for ourselves.
we care for others,
We care for our space.
and we try our best.
I have some dreams from Mary Hogan. To accomplish great things.
make Mary Hogan School a better place. To help people feel comfortable and feel a sense of belonging. To make good changes that are helpful to the school. To take part in change the school for the better fit of the students and represent the students' voices. We want to make kids feel safe and comfortable in school. To make school something to look forward to. To be part of positive change.
So our first initiatives this year were to change our lunchroom seating policy to that we can sit wherever we want in the lunchroom, not just with our class tables. So I made a petition that a lot of people signed to do that. And then I got on student council and we made a list of expectations that kids have to follow to be able to sit wherever they want, and if they weren't following them, then they would have to be asked to leave for a while. And so after that, we were doing pretty good, and then we went to the 3rd and 4th grade to go through the same process. And so far, the 3rd and 4th grade has it on Fridays, and hopefully they'll get to do that for the whole week.
These are the agreements for the lunchroom, and this kind of ties back to the essential agreements for how we care for ourselves. We stay in our seats, we make safe choices, we use quiet voices, we raise our hand for assistance, we watch for signals, we listen respectfully, we wait to be dismissed. And how we care for others is we make sure no one is excluded or left alone. We use appropriate volume and language in conversation. We are respectful to all adults and students, we encourage appropriate behavior. And how we care for our space is we keep our table area clean. We carefully return trays, and we pick up anything that we drop. We put trash, compost, and dishes where they belong. And we try our best to do all of these.
This is School Spirit Days. School Spirit Days bring us together. They unite the school, and they're a lot of fun for teachers and students get involved in the fun.
Last week was Say Something Week, and it was something new but big for our school. The importance of being role models and upstanders in our community. Say Something reminds us to help others identify adults in our community we can talk to and step up and lead. We had four morning announcements, and this is just a piece of it. These were Say Something Week morning announcements, and they were just really part of it. So I'll give you a part of the one that I did. Hello, Mary Hogan Hops. I'm Greta Suter from Student Council here with a kindergartner from Mrs. Crosby's class. We are going to start today's announcements with our essential agreements. We care for ourselves, we care for others, we care for our space, we try our best. Now these would be repeated and it would be over the intercom into every classroom. So we would wait a little bit between each one. This week is Say Something Week, a time to intentionally practice being assertive and helping others, ourselves and others, using our amazing voices for good. more about morning and, okay, I don't have to move.
And there is a picture that was there. But if you'd like to take a moment of mindfulness, across the screen. And we've also, the kids, the picture that was up there is a bulletin board out in the hallway, so please take time to visit that sometime this evening before you leave.
It is our role and responsibility as student council to model the learner profile for others.
So a couple of traits that we did are caring, principled, open-minded, thinkers, risk-takers, inquirers, effective, balanced, and knowledgeable communicators.
Part of the expectation of student council members is to work hard to practice and demonstrate these qualities.
There it is.
This is what we are hoping to do. Recess improvement strategy for lining up and other expectations, games and activities. Hat rules. Kids can wear hats. Buddy benches. A place for kids to go on the playground when they are looking for a friend to play with. Community building activities, spirit days, new songs, announcements, rethink these. School-wide play all day before or after April break.
Talent show, organize an event that brings the community together. Visits to elderly services, making community connections. Meet with organizations from MUHS and MUMS, SAGA, Student Council, other leadership organizations. Bathroom improvements, improve school lunches.
I'm back? Okay, so thank you so much for supporting student council. And does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, do you guys, so when you run, is your term for 1 year? Or like our terms are for 3 years? How long is each person's term?
So each person's term is 1 year, because if it was like, well, we just started it this year, so it's only this year that, then you can get reelected if you're like in 5th grade. Yeah, 1 year. Any other questions?
Question and a comment. First, I just wanted to say, as somebody who still gets nervous getting up in front of people, I thought you guys did an incredible job. So, kudos to you. And my question, kind of related to the other question, it seemed like there were, unless my hearing didn't hear correctly, it seemed like a lot of you were 5th graders. So I wondered, when I saw 5th and 6th grade, I just assumed like you would be elected like from your classroom. So it sounds like anybody in the 5th and 6th grade could vote for anybody in the 5th and 6th grade. Is that correct?
I have an answer for that one, actually.
Keeping it at that we have 4 5th grades and 3 6th grades.
Yeah. So part of it is that we have 4 5th grades now, not 3, like we have 3 6th grades. Also, there were a lot of 3-way ties, or 2 people tied for 2nd and 1 person won. So that's why there's a bigger population in 5th grade. Yeah.
So also, like, I'm in Mr. Flynn's class, and we have 4 representatives because there was a two-way tie and one person that just got elected. But then Gabe actually transferred to our class, so now we have 4.
I have one last very important question. Now you all have run for something and won. Would any of you like to run for chair of the school board? Thank you. Maybe I'll talk to you later. Thank you all.
I do think this is your future board.
That's right. We'll take it. We will take it. Any other questions? Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Next on the agenda is a recommendation to approve the minutes of February 10th, 2020.
I move that we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any absentia? Great. So approved. Next on the agenda, report of the superintendent.
You missed bills.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's chronic.
It's chronic, I guess it's, I don't need to do this, but we're supposed to do this, so bear with me. There's 4 weeks of bills. First one is from the 14th of February, read by myself and Victoria. General fund amount of $179,015.64. And payroll-related bills of $804,006.31. Second week, from the 21st of February, the general fund of $89,672.01, also read by myself and Victoria. Third week, February 28th, general fund numbers of $230,292.16, and a payroll-related amount of $787,110. That was for March 2nd and for February 28th. And the last is today, actually from the 6th, but were read today again by Victoria, and I reread them all 4 weeks, of $151,074.98. I move that we pay these bills.
Second. Great. Thank you both very much. Next on the agenda.
You have to vote for it.
All in favor to approve bills as...
Forget if there's discussion and questions.
Any discussion or questions on the bills? All those in favor, are we sure? All those in favor of approving the bills as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Some people don't have to stare at the
Next on the agenda, report of the superintendent. Peter.
So you received the written report. As usual, a lot going on, a lot of exciting things going on. There are 2 things I wanted to talk about that are not on the report, which are pertinent educationally and kind of in our country and in the world right now. So one is locally, the weighting study. I sent the board information on a number of different data and reports on the weighting study, which is currently in Senate Ed right now. If you read through the data, you saw that there's an impact for Addison Central. I think the percentage is a 9.8% difference for our equalized pupil count. If they implemented all of the recommendations There are some tweaks that need to happen for, I think, that data to be completely accurate, so I wouldn't put a ton of emphasis on that 9.8, but we do know when we look at districts like ours, we look at our neighbors, we look at Champlain Valley, Essex, they all have a pretty significant negative in terms of equalized pupil with the weighting study. Again, the weighting study is looking at how much do we weight each individual student that we educate. This has not been revised in a long time. As the professors did the research and looking at this, they found that some of these numbers were kind of created on the back of a napkin. Wasn't really a lot of empirical research behind some of the weighting. They did an exhaustive study across all 49 states to look at how do others go about weighting poverty, weighting secondary, elementary, weighting English language learners, etc., and kind of came up with recommendations to the legislature based on their review of all of their states. So most people in the field feel that the study is important. I think the message that the three superintendents in Addison County are giving to our legislators is we are supportive of the rationale behind the study. At the same time, there are a lot of unintended consequences, and it's very complex in terms of what are the impacts of the study locally in terms of funding, in terms of districts that are newly unified versus districts that are not. So we're recommending that they take time to study the impacts prior to just saying, yes, we're going to go and we're going to do it in 3 years and next year is year 1. So that the Senate is, I believe, meeting tomorrow, correct? And hearing testimony?
Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay. It's meeting Wednesday to hear testimony. So that's something that I just, good to know. Peter, do you have anything to add?
Sure. So yes, the Senate Education Committee will be taking testimony from the public at a hearing Wednesday afternoon. What is expected is there are going to be a lot of folks, especially from southern Vermont, for whom the weighting study would be very beneficial, but more importantly, they're from districts that have largely been, I would think they would say that they are largely rural and less affluent than other districts who feel that the time is long overdue to make this change. But what the Senate is actually proposing, at least at this point, is really creating an implementation task force that would make recommendations on how to make this rather large change in our pupil count system. And it would definitely be phased in over a number of years. So that's basically where it stands today.
Right. The second thing I wanted to raise is the work we're doing on COVID-19. As you all know, daily we're getting new updates. There's an incredible amount of media coverage right now on it. We are talking daily. I just sent something to the community before this meeting with an update on the work that we're doing. We continue to take direction from the Department of Health and the Agency of Education. It would be chaos if every district kind of met with a small team in their district and kind of made these decisions without the backing of experts. So the Department of Health and Agency of Education have been really good at communicating with the field over the last number of weeks in providing direction. I got an email yesterday after I think there was an announcement of a case in Bennington, or I can't remember if it was Bennington or somewhere else in Vermont, but Bennington. And so definitely aware that these 1 or 2 cases that people are going to start reacting. So they're really kind of driving how we respond. There are smaller things that we're talking about and thinking about. Our crisis team met today and talked about communication. We talked about field trips. Our nurses put together information for families to talk to students about COVID-19. Obviously, with this kind of thing, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with it. It triggers anxiety for some students and some staff, so that's something that we're also aware of and trying to support students as we go through this process. I'm going to be learning more tomorrow morning. I'm meeting with the Champlain Valley superintendents at our monthly meeting, and I believe the Department of Health will be at our meeting. We as a group are going to be talking about how do we respond so that we're not all moving in different directions, but we're really moving together. When you think about what could happen, you think about school closure, you think about all these kinds of things, there are so many moving pieces and parts to trying to continue education, providing meals and services for students that count on schools for those things. And as I said, we'll be communicating often to community, working together to figure these things out and solve them. And as I said, leaning on the experts to help guide us. And this is something that, in my time in Vermont, I've never seen everybody coming together and wanting to do it the same way. So I think that's really helpful. Yeah.
That to me is really important, but the communication, because I got something this morning that Williston School was closed because of only because my daughter teaches in that district.
Yeah.
And, there wasn't anything backing it up. It was closed because of COVID-19. And so it would seem as you learn more, it may be good for us as a district, along with others, to sort of say, what are the trip points that are going to cause it to happen? If someone is suspicious for having contact in Bridport or Shoreham, does that close the entire district? There's all sorts of things that people have anxieties about. Not that you can answer that right now, but I think that's one of the things, not only deciding what it's going to happen, but also informing all of us to sort of understand there's this consistent pattern that's going to trip it and cause it. Because it is unbelievably, it's hard to even imagine all of these scenarios. I can't even imagine what it's like in Japan or what it's like in Italy or whatever. All the schools in Italy are closed. What? How is this?
Yeah.
So not that that's necessarily going to happen, but I think you as superintendent with your other folks to make sure that we as a public understand what those trip points are. So when they do happen, it's not like, well, why did they say that? Or why did they? That's just my sense as a community member and a doc.
Agree.
Peter, do you intend for the plan after tomorrow to be discussed tomorrow? So what are the steps that need to be taken from the communication? All that's being discussed tomorrow, or how?
We're talking, superintendents will be talking around kind of school closure and getting guidance, for example, from the Department of Health. I would imagine that instead of something that says within, if you have a case in one school, if you have any schools within 10 miles, you're going to close those schools, 15 miles you're not. I think it's going to be, my sense is it's going to be communication directly with the Department of Health to say, here's the situation on the ground, what do we need to do?
What should we do? Okay.
There is an EOC, which is an emergency operations center, it's like a formal term that the state established last week.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw, there was a picture of Governor Scott in the EOC in the paper today or yesterday, and maybe it was in Digger or something.
Digger,
yeah. So that's you would be calling that EOC, and the EOC is going to be looking and seeing what's happening throughout Vermont, and I think providing direction to say yes, close down your whole district. So I think it's going to be more of a problem solving, rather than set parameters that I can share to say, every field trip from here to April 15th is canceled and then it's fine, or a certain kind of perimeter. That being said, we are talking about, we were talking today about field trips. We are going to cancel a few field trips that are coming up in the next few weeks, one to Montreal, one to New York City. That's in line with what all of our other districts around us are doing too.
Are you considering or planning for potential at at-home learning or remote learning opportunities if students need to be home for a few weeks at a time?
That's something that I think we'll talk about tomorrow as a group of superintendents, but we've talked about it, the ability to make that happen and get Wi-Fi to every house and a device to every house, and moving online when we're not online at all is a huge ramp up. So it's something that I think if it looked like there was going to be closure and it was going to be for an extended period of time, we're talking months, I would think, I think we would need to figure out how would we start, how would that look? I don't know what kind of, parameters would be put on contact with others and, all the other pieces, but yeah, I mean, it's scary, and I don't, in other countries, it doesn't sound like that's happening. Like they haven't moved completely online right away. It's, they're continuing to problem solve it to figure out how long do we need to stay closed. So there are a lot of unknowns.
Mary?
I just have a question about staffing, because I understand the governor said that we're going to have more liberal, absentee policies. If somebody's symptomatic, they're supposed to stay home, right? So teachers and staff may be taking time off or being quarantined for 14 days or whatever. And I know you've had some difficulty meeting staffing needs with substitutes.
I'm not thinking about that, actually.
Again.
I mean, yeah, we'll have to.
Yeah,
we'll have to respond, and we're not going to find employees that don't exist. So I think it would be looking within our own staff to reorganize and shuffle, and yeah. I mean, I think we're going to have to be creative.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Peter?
Well, this is about a different part of the report, but kind of on the same topic. I just noticed there's a little item in here from Chris Franco at the middle school that they had a successful ALICE training, or a drill. Could you walk us through what an ALICE drill is for middle school students?
Sure.
Just curious.
Well, I mean, there are different kinds of drills, so there's not one drill. Students are taught, the basic ALICE acronym is following a standard lockdown drill for the most part. Where ALICE departs from a standard lockdown drill is evacuate, and using kind of in an active intruder situation, also barring the door and essentially trying to thwart whatever the intruder is trying to do. So those are kind of the two. Evacuating, generally traditional lockdown has required students to stay in one place and remain quiet, lights go out. In certain situations in ALICE and in Run, Hide, Fight, which is another protocol that's being used throughout Vermont as well, students are taught to, as a last resort, to both create a distraction, fight back, or evacuate if evacuation seems to be safer. And there's lots of data that supports those two responses in an active intruder incident. So they're going through, they're learning about those things at their level, obviously, and being thoughtful, and the reason that I think one of the reasons she put it in there is given what we experienced last year and the trauma of that whole experience. There was a lot of thought going into how do we make this empowering as opposed to triggering a sense of fear.
Right?
I have a question, and you may not be able to answer it, Peter,
Yeah.
another section of the report that was for Bill. He mentioned the woman who helps with college planning.
Sarah?
A couple of colleges paid her way out to visit them.
Yeah.
That just seemed odd to me. Is that something normal? And I don't know, it just struck me as strange that copies of being our employees go out and work on the college.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard, yeah.
Normally, when they come.
For her to get a better sense of a, of a place, if we were in California and Middlebury College brought a high school counselor out here to get to know their school, as they're helping students figure out where they go, it's really different to go on a website and read about a school as opposed to going and kind of seeing what it's like. So yeah, that's...
So she does that a lot?
Not a lot, but she's done it, yeah.
Yeah, for for example, Vermont Higher Association organizes one for all of the Vermont institutions that other guidance counselors do, that they've been doing for years. So it's common practice.
And so people can come out of state.
Yep. The whole idea is to promote higher ed in that state. So my guess is that they've done some coordination in Minnesota.
And Jen?
Just one more about the PYP visits.
Yeah.
From the MYP visit, it seems as though there's some involvement or opportunity for parents or community to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
When does that happen and in what form? I haven't seen anything yet, like as a parent, for example,
right.
these are coming up.
Kayla, do you know what the timing is?
So I know that, I need my calendar, the dates of the teams will be visiting each of the schools.
That's in our
The
report.
schedule for each of those schools will be built in collaboration between the building principal and the IB coordinators. And Jen, do you know who will be taking the lead on inviting parental involvement in those days?
The principals, this is my understanding.
So I would imagine you should be looking for information from them soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's one, so like Mary Hogan has a two-day visit, and it's only like a 25-minute parent meeting. So like for me to think, I'm just trying to think about numbers and representation.
Yeah, the IB
I assume it's the same for all schools.
organization prescribes, these are the stakeholder groups we need to meet with. And then the coordinator and principal work together to figure out how to make that work within a school day when the students are in class.
So some parents might be invited, it might not be an open invitation, and students are invited, or they just visit students' classrooms.
They tour the school, they'll interact, in some cases they make it a tour of the school by students. So again, that's really practical at the school level. And different schools have organized that differently, either invited specific people in or blasted an invitation wider. I think the point of inviting is to make sure that you've actually had communication, you know people are coming.
Right.
But we really do want some diverse representation to sort of represent the diversity within our community in all ways.
Any other questions for Peter? Great, thank you. Now I believe you're up again for
Yes.
teaching and learning.
So I've invited Caitlin to come and give an update on ACSD teaching and learning.
Okay. Let me go over here so I don't have my back to half of the audience. So, as I was saying, it's hard to give an update on teaching and learning since we do so, that's sort of what we do. Teaching and learning, and so I was looking for a way to give you an update on our IB work, which has been big, and now we're 4 years in. 4 years since we made the decision to really embrace IB, and longer since the actual inquiry into the model started. But I wanted to just sort of give you an update about IB to help you understand how it intersects with so many of the things that we do in our system. So I really think of this as IB not as, well, it isn't a curriculum, certainly not a canned curriculum. It isn't a person. It really is a framework, and we have really used this framework to leverage change in a pretty big way over the past 4 years.
And so I really think it has helped us with connection, with coherence across our system, and with generating a sense of community, especially a sense of community across our 7 separate elementary schools. So, 4 years ago when I was quite new here, I was in a board meeting and a presentation where faculty members were talking about their inquiry into IB and naming how the IB framework really captured, curated best practice in education. And while we feel good about this because we know from the research that this is good practice, and that phrases like that were said repeatedly. And at one point, somebody raised their hand and said, so this is just best practice, and we already know this. Why do we need a program to do this for us? And it was a good question. So this is me trying to capture that. If IB is just best practice, my paraphrase here, what I remember from 4 years ago, and we already substantially knew what best practice is, then why do we need a program to do the work? So, it is not just a program. It is a framework, and it has helped us with large-scale systems change. So 4 years ago, we were still ACSU, and now we are ACSD, and IB has played a role in that coming together of our community. Back when I was in graduate school, I encountered an article that I keep thinking about. The article is called Leverage Points, Places to Intervene in a System by Donella Meadows, a systems analyst. And it's just a thought piece. It's not a research-based piece, it's just a thought piece. But she enumerates 12 different leverage points, places where you can intervene in a system to make change or to prevent change. Where can you dig in? And it goes from, there are 12 things, and number 12 is sort of the lowest point of leverage, and it's parameters like taxes and standards. We spend a lot of time in those spaces. But then she goes through and goes to higher and higher points of leverage, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of them because I used it to frame this meeting. So number 5 is pretty high on her list of 12. So point of high leverage is the rules of the system, such as incentives, punishments, and constraints. Number 4 is the power to add, change, evolve, or self-organize system and structure. These are all going to be relevant as I look at little bits of what we've done with IB. Number 3, really high in the leverage points list, the goals of a system. If we intervene in a system at the level of goals, we can have a really big impact. And number 2 is the mindset or paradigm out of which the system, its goals, structure, rules, delays, parameters arises. So if we think about the system and our way of being it completely differently, we can really shift how we act in it. Number 1 is the ability to transcend paradigms, and I can't figure out how to do that, so I didn't even bring it into this. So if we look at IB and ACSD as a new paradigm, so we've got from a supervisory union to a district, and this commitment to the IB mission statement is something we're all doing together. Don't read it all, but just remember that IB has us working on developing inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people who help to create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. And then down at the bottom, we're helping students to become active, compassionate, and lifelong learners who understand that other people with their differences can also be right. So that's sort of a new paradigm. We are one district and we're all committed to this mission. So what does that look like as we've tried to roll out IB over the last 4 years? Paradigm is the same across all of our programs. We're one district with a common curriculum framework, IB. That's what we're building toward. In the primary years program, this is just one example of how we've made use of this. So the goal is a common curriculum to increase excellence and equity across ACSD elementary schools. That's the goal. We've been impacted by, and we have impacted the rules. So IB prescribes a curriculum framework. There are non-negotiables in that. But curriculum components, pieces of that framework, we have negotiated. We've looked at what's tight and what's loose in our alignment across schools, and we've made those decisions locally in a collaboration between administrators and educators. So, self-organization remember, if we go back to this, number 4 here, the power to add, change, evolve, or self-organize system structure is a point of high leverage. So how have we used self-organization in terms of curriculum? So IB coordinators and administrators have provided explicit guidelines. These are the things that we will do together. Coordinators, our IB coordinators have worked with our IB teacher leaders to organize and facilitate grade level team collaboration. And then the teachers have done the work. So they've built together a common district curriculum. So all of our third grade teachers come together and collaborate. We had to create structures to make that happen, but it's the teachers doing the work. And out of this, some things that have been anticipated to happen. We have a common curriculum. That was a non-negotiable. We needed to build that. But other unanticipated things have happened. So great examples, big fun examples of the Youth Citizen Summit and the Sustainability Expo. IB did not mandate any of that, nor did administrators in this system. Those emerged from teachers collaborating across schools with big ideas. And they really have contributed to a sense of community. When students from schools across the district show up at Middlebury College for the World Citizen, or the Youth Citizen Summit, that's a sense of, that helps students understand what it means to be an ACSD student. So, you won't be able to read all of this next slide, don't try. This is just a snapshot of our curriculum, and this is just a snapshot of like a pretty version of the big, messy work we've done. This happens to be the negotiated curriculum for third grade. I gravitate toward third grade because my daughter happens to be a third grader, right? And so I imagine if she were a student here, what would she be studying? So I want to show you how this is built. First of all, if you just look at the top, those are the themes that are prescribed by IB. So this one here is how the world works. The theme description is also given to us. That language is given to us by IB. So how the world works is one of 6 themes that gets repeated yearly in the primary years program, and it's described this way. How the world works is an inquiry into the natural world and its laws, the interaction between the natural world, physical and biological, and human societies, how humans use their understanding of scientific principles, the impact of scientific and technological advances on society and on the environment. Third grade is not studying all of that in one unit, right? But they are, if you can see in bold, the interaction between the natural world, physical and biological, and human societies. That's where the third grade teachers decided to dig in for this unit. Those little theme descriptors, the bits of that description between the semicolons, those are carefully articulated through our curriculum from pre-K through 6. So every part of that theme will be unpacked at some point, and many parts of it more than once. There are a lot of ways in which this curriculum is balanced horizontally and vertically through collaboration and coordination. So every unit has a central idea, and this is really at the heart of the unit. So this one, How the World Works, focuses on the natural world impacts human activities, and human activities impact the natural world. That's what third graders are working on in this unit. IB requires us to have a central idea, but the language of that central idea was developed by our teachers here. An IB curriculum is concept-based. So IB prescribes a series of key concepts, of which change, causation, and form are some of them. Key concepts are also balanced vertically and horizontally throughout our curriculum. So those ideas come up over and over again. The related concepts give you a sense of what the content of this unit is. This is a unit about climate, weather, engineering and technology, and resources. What I haven't shown you in here is that these units are framed predominantly through next-gen science standards and C3 social studies standards, with the Common Core language and literacy standards woven in wherever possible. And increasingly, we'll build some math into these. And then the lines of inquiry sort of help you understand how the students in this unit will be unpacking this central idea. So they will be exploring how weather and climate affect humans in their everyday lives. Form in parentheses is one of those key concepts. They'll look at how the use of resources impacts the natural world, focusing on causation.
And they'll look at how humans respond innovatively to challenges, focusing on change. So these pieces of the curriculum, our teachers wrote those lines of inquiry together collaboratively. These are agreed upon across all 7 of our schools, including the standards that are behind this. And then there's quite a lot of flexibility about what that looks like in each school, in each classroom, and evolving in response to student engagement and student interest. So that's just a snapshot of how this is built. And this was a predictable outcome. I mean, not all of the wording, but the idea of this structure was prescribed, and then we built within that. What was less predictable is what comes out of that. Oops. So, for instance, grade 5 unit, how we organize ourselves, their central idea is governments can promote or deny human rights. And out of that collaboration between 5th grade teachers last year came this concept of the Youth Citizen Summit. This is a photo from this year's, the 2nd annual Youth Citizen Summit. Not a predicted outcome of this work, but one of the things that has emerged from this work that I think really helps us to have a sense of what our identity is as a district through this IB lens. All right, I'm going to keep going if people don't have questions. So now I want to look at the middle years program. Same paradigm, one district with a common curriculum framework, but rather than looking at curriculum, I want to look at proficiency-based teaching and learning, which was mandated to us by the state of Vermont, and IB has really given us a framework within which to do that work meaningfully. So, goal. A proficiency-based system in which assessment informs instruction and grades accurately represent student learning. This is a goal that we set for ourselves based on what the state of Vermont was asking us to do. So, IB has these great rules that really help with this. They have criteria defined, and this is in the middle years program, so for us currently 7th through 10th grade and soon to be 6th through 10th grade. Within the MYP, there are criteria defined for each of the content areas and rubrics prescribed. And so, whereas across Vermont, a lot of those criteria, those proficiencies, and those rubrics are being built on the ground, we were handed tools that we were able to use. And I think it really helped us to dive deeply into the sort of purpose and meaning behind the work. So, the common assessment, grading, and reporting practices we negotiated locally. So in terms of self-organization, our IB coordinators and administrators have led professional learning, and we've engaged colleagues to build common expectations of proficiency-based assessment and reporting. And teachers and teaching teams have worked within those guidelines to develop assessments and assessment practices that serve their content areas and the students. And out of this, the teaching and learning guides have emerged to define and support common practices at MOMS and MUHS. So IB required us to have an assessment policy. Vermont required us to do proficiency-based teaching and learning. Conveniently, those things work really well together. But when we did the learning together and developed these common agreements, it felt clear that we needed another document. And the IB coordinators at the high school and middle school really took the lead on framing these teaching and learning guides, which capture our shared practices. You can't take all of this in. But I wanted to share it as an artifact of one of the things I'm really excited about that we did. So last year, way back in the fall of 2018, we did some deep learning on proficiency-based teaching and learning. And we decided that we would take the MYP unit planner to help us think through this professional development that we were running. So thinking like the teachers in leading not a lesson for students, but a lesson for our colleagues. So this is a snapshot. I'm going to walk you through some of the fun parts of it, of sort of the broad strokes of a middle years program unit planner. So just like with the primary years, the IB curriculum is concept driven, so there are key concepts and there are related concepts. Rather than a central idea, the MYP units are framed by a statement of inquiry. So our statement of inquiry for our PD for faculty was an effective proficiency-based grading system propels teaching and learning by defining learning goals, measuring evidence, and communicating feedback to students, parents, and educators in an equitable and transparent manner. So that was the big idea that we were communicating and exploring through this professional development that we ran. We had a specific objective, like our teachers would have when they're designing units for their students. Our objective for it was 2 days of work was that teachers will build common expectations of proficiency-based assessment to maximize transparency, opportunity, and growth for all students through the MYP. And then, just like our teachers do for their students, we unpacked this concept through factual questions, conceptual questions, and debatable questions. So the factual ones, what are Vermont's requirements around proficiency-based teaching and learning? We shared what we knew from Act 77, EQS, all that. What do we measure and how was a factual question. Conceptual questions, what's the purpose of assessment? How does proficiency-based grading propel teaching and learning, and why does consistency matter in grading and reporting? So these are questions that we created activities around so that teachers could engage with that work. And then debatable questions. What evidence of learning is most critical to communicate? Oh my goodness, we've been doing this question at the elementary level this year as we rebuild our progress report. This is really hard, thinking about what are the standards we're reporting out on, and what brain size, and what information do parents want, and what information do teachers need. It's easy to get lost in the weeds there. And then what do students and parents need to know on and between progress reports? So we did that work at the secondary level, and we're working on it now at the elementary level. So that was just fun because it helped us understand how that curriculum is built as we were rolling out stuff that our teachers really needed to be working on. And as I said, the outcome of that sort of extended collaboration was these two guides, the MUHS Teaching and Learning Guide and the LUMS Teaching and Learning Guide, and they look, these are just the cover pages obviously, they look really similar. They're very similar because we're trying to articulate a single grading and reporting system, district-wide, but they're not identical, because they differentiate to be developmentally appropriate to middle school students versus high school students.
Maybe a younger one with tiger.
That's not a bad idea. So, I think I've shared this information. I think I've shared this information with you in the past. This book, Breaking with Tradition, The Shift to Competency-Based Learning in PLCs at Work, was the text that seemed the most useful as at the secondary level we were exploring proficiency-based teaching and learning. And within this Breaking with Tradition, they say there are key considerations for effective competency-based. Competency-based and proficiency-based are synonymous. Competency-based learning and grading practices, and they include grade to communicate student learning. Use diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment. Stop averaging grades. We look at patterns of time in student learning and growth. We don't average the low grade that they got in the fall with the high grade that they got in the spring and say that that accurately reflects what they know and can do now. Separate academics from behaviors. So turning your homework in late is not an indication that you do or do not know the content. And so we separate those at the high school, they report out on work habits, and at the middle level, it's approaches to learning. We separate out those non-academic skills and approaches from the academic learning. Allow for reassessment, opportunities and more opportunities to demonstrate learning, to demonstrate proficiency, and using rubrics and scales, not percentage scores. Okay. Any questions on that? I'm going to jump to the next one.
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
You know, assessment is probably one of the things that there is a increased sensitivity towards the school and home conversation. Parents get it. There's grades, there's assessment. How's my kids doing? When shifting to a competency-based paradigm, that's different for almost every parent who's ever thought about their own assessment experience in school. Where would you assess us as a district in helping parents understand what this stuff means when it's presented to them, and giving them a comfort level of how it will serve their kids as they move into either college applications or post-secondary experiences?
Okay. We have work to do. We have done work too. So we have sent, as we roll out these new report cards, last year we dipped our toes in, and this year we really rolled out these new MYP report cards. They come with letters explaining how they work. Courtney Fawn, our MYP coordinator, created a video showing parents how to read it. And we have had a couple of different events where there have been opportunities to learn and engage, but this, talk about a new paradigm. This really is a new paradigm of teaching and learning. And so, I mean, there are important differences. So for instance, it pulls us away from comparing students to students, and instead we're looking at student learning as measured against specific and clear criteria for success. It's interesting, the middle school had been using proficiency-based teaching and learning for a while, and so they've evolved from an old proficiency system to a newer proficiency system. So I think that some of that change has been easier to absorb there. They haven't given letter grades in a very long time, and they're still not. At the secondary level, we have, in these two guides, there's this great table that's a conversion chart that goes from how do you get from the scores on the rubric to an OLA, an overall level of achievement, which is the grade that you're getting in a class. That is bizarre that IB needs to provide these conversion charts because they have 8-point rubrics and 7-point OLAs. So that's strange because the diploma program is a 7-point system, the middle years program has these 8-point rubrics, and so they show you how to convert from one system to the other. At the middle level, that conversion chart really explains, and it has a nice narrative that explains. So if you have a 3 or a 5 or a 7 on this scale, what does that mean in narrative forms about how your student is doing? It's a great, really useful chart. At the high school level, we added 2 columns. One column converts the OLA, the overall level of achievement, to a letter grade, which in the purest interpretation of proficiency-based teaching and learning is in some places interpreted as a no letter grades. What's interesting, I think the reason that I think that it's okay and works for us is that there's no way to go from a letter grade back to rubric scores. You can't design that backward. You have to go from the rubric and follow the chart in order to get to that letter grade. So that letter grade should be representative of actual student learning as measured against actual criteria in prescribed rubrics. We also have a column for a GPA, and what that does is it allows us to have a traditional transcript. So our school still interfaces with colleges in a traditional way. I don't know whether that's the forever, but it's been a nice way of doing what I think is really good, authentic, proficiency-based teaching and learning practice on the ground without having to negotiate that extra complicated, but what does it look like in colleges? Which is happening in Vermont. Those conversations are happening, and that is wonderful. And I think that we will get to a place where it's smooth.
Great.
But that's where we are at this point. I don't think that we have nailed our communication. I know that work is not done. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so now let's look briefly at the diploma. Sorry. The diploma program. So same paradigm, one district with a common curriculum framework, and in this context, we have a goal of IB for all. We want to maximize access to and success within IB programs, including the DP. This is a hard goal. This is a big, hard goal. And we're really working on it. So rules. We have been paying consistent attention to the rules that would impact access and or success. So when we're thinking about what courses do we offer, what are the entrance requirements for those courses? What are we doing about these testing fees? What are our graduation requirements? When we answer those kinds of questions, which we get to, IB won't prescribe those. We get to choose those on the ground. We've been really designing with this lens of how do we do IB for all? How do we maximize access? And then once students choose to access that, how do we maximize success? So this is a work in progress, but these are the questions that we're working on. So self-organization. ACSD educators collaborated with the Career Center colleagues to explore the IBCP. You know that was a grant that we did last year. That's really part of this question about how do we create as much access as possible to this world-class curriculum and programming. Moms and MUHS departments collaborate to strengthen vertical alignment. I popped into the 7th to 12th grade math department meeting today where they were having hard and important conversations about these new requirements from IB and how they do and do not align with the Common Core and what work they need to do to prepare students for those higher level diploma program courses. This collaboration is really important to us building the system that really supports the most successful students. Special educators have been assigned at the high school to collaborate with specific departments to support planning for learning diversity. So if we're including students with diverse learning needs in classrooms together, it's really important to have learning specialists in the work collaborating with classroom teachers in designing that. So those structures have been in place and we're learning how to make use of them at this point. So emerging out of this is important. Emerging from this goal of IB for all across all levels is a clear need for professional learning and collaboration around inclusion. UDL is Universal Design for Learning, designing for learning diversity. Along with a renewed focus on early literacy and math instruction, it really matters that we develop those foundational skills so that our students can access this curriculum. This intersects deeply and importantly with the work that Vicki was presenting at Cornwall last month about the systems of support and student services. We can't meet this goal without that work. Okay. We also have this fun Middlebury College curriculum or collaboration. This is my last little bit for you. So we've got the same paradigm, one district with a common curriculum framework. Our goal in this partnership, this is specifically looking at the partnership between the Ed Studies program at Middlebury College and the district. So we're going to increase learning for pre-K through 16 students, so pre-K students through undergrads, teacher candidates, P16 faculty, and education scholars, people doing research. That's our goal. Rules. We've had to pay a lot of attention to constraints across both institutions. What will Middlebury College let us do? What will ACSD let us do? How can we work within those constraints to collaborate? So things like tuition and credits. And incentives for participation. If we want our faculty engaged, the college is actually providing stipends for faculty members to come and collaborate on this work. So, ACSD and Middlebury College educators have collaborated to establish a professional development school. This is a model from the National Association of Professional Development Schools that basically our goal is a synopsis of what a PDS does. Professional Development School does. Emerging from this collaboration, lots of fun things. So, workshops provided by Middlebury College faculty, especially on issues of equity and inclusion. Shelley Moore as our 2019 keynote speaker who focused on inclusion. I think we talked about her last month. That was donation from the Ed Studies program at the college. Expanded language and motion programming, bringing undergraduate students who have had international experiences into our schools to work with our students. They have been a big presence. Language and motion students have been a big presence at our Youth Citizen Summit for 2 years in a row. And this year, the first in a series of graduate classes offered through Middlebury College called For the Love of Learning. So this year is For the Love of Learning, Individuals and Societies. That's IB language for social studies. So we have Jonathan Millerlane, Middlebury College professor, is running a full graduate level education course that meets one Wednesday a month for 4.5 hours. He brings in presenters, guests, faculty, and staff and deans from the college to come and talk to our faculty. They assign our readings. It's seminar style, and then we all have dinner together that's catered by the college, and it's phenomenal. And then afterwards, the guest professors leave, and we talk about implications for practice. It's been a really rich work. We had 18 ACSD employees, K through 12 educators, and 3 principals sign up for this class. It's been great. And when I said, like, this attention to constraints across both institutions, we had to, Middlebury College offers 1 credit courses at such and such pay scale, but we fund under our master agreement, the equivalent of 3 credit courses at the UVM rate. And so we had to work together across these institutions to increase the number of hours and reduce the cost so that we could afford it within systems that already exist here. I did mention at that annual meeting that we did go over budget because people are so engaged in professional learning this year, and this is one of the reasons. This class was in high demand. Next year we're running another class. We've reined in the budget a little bit, but we're running For the Love of Learning Science next year. And I'm pretty sure that Jonathan will offer a second version of For the Love of Learning Individuals and Societies, but open it to a broader audience. So now the work that we're doing in-house is starting to have a broader impact. And then my last slide just shares the mission of the PDS. So again, the PDS is that partnership between the Ed Studies program and ACSD, and I want you to look at this for that IB language that is in here. So the PDS of the ACMP, terrible acronyms, we're working on that, through a commitment to democratic inquiry, prepares and sustains educators to be knowledgeable, principled, thoughtful, and open-minded decision makers to create a more just, compassionate, and peaceful world. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Caitlin. Any other questions for Caitlin? Great job. Thank you.
One comment, the IB for all was one of the basic questions when the board decided to engage us.
Yeah.
I wasn't on, well, I was there for both, but I wasn't there for all of it. But because of IB's history and how it started with a very select group of probably high-achieving people, they've had to work back into this. And that was, to me, the real question that was this going to work? You know, I mean, I'm encouraged that it looks like it is for all of the right reasons, but it's still ongoing.
Yes.
And challenging. To me, that particular statement has always been the one that I look to see where it's really working. So I'm not saying it isn't, I'm just saying that's going to be my way to say how this comes together.
Well, and you know, when you look back at the last 4 years and our strategic plan reports, and you look at the gaps that we've been presenting, you know, we're coming from a really huge opportunity gap in our communities. So we have, I think, a ways to go to start to bridge that gap. IB has, the IB for all is not, I mean, it's something that we coined, but really when you look at IB implementation across the country, there are a number of large districts that have used IB to create the kind of system that Caitlin shared tonight to start to move the needle, as opposed to hoping for pockets of excellence in classrooms and having that shift, that, you know, basically take that opportunity gap and shrink it. Places like Chicago and a lot of IB schools in Florida, Colorado, that are not in affluent communities, that are in communities that have had tons of leadership turnover, a lot of staff turnover, and they have had some positive, and we shared some of that in our run-up to deciding to move forward. We looked at some of those districts to look at it. At the same time, you know, this work is years long. It's not a 1 year, 2 year thing. And you know, as Caitlin shared, the connection between the IB framework and our system of services has to be super tight. The benefit of our work with IB has been we hit reset on pretty much everything. And because we had just unified, the timing was perfect for us to be looking at our curricular framework, looking at our support systems, that work which began this year and is going into next year as well. We're poised to make some pretty significant changes there, which I think will then have us be in a place where we're really deepening understanding, and we're not adding something new, we're not layering things on top, but we're really sustaining something that's really powerful, that's backed by data, and that also has some kind of fluidity and creativity to it, which I think Caitlin did a great job of presenting tonight.
Excellent.
So I would just comment and sort of complement somewhat of a go slow approach on the proficiency-based grading at the secondary level and sort of creating that transcript that seems to work well. This is causing a lot of angst in other parts of the state. And, I think we're going about this in a very thoughtful way. It's clearly still being worked out, but I think it's really trying to be worked out other places, and we can sort of learn from other places as we move along. And I think also having IB in there, which is a known commodity, is probably very helpful as we continue to move down that path.
Any other comments?
Well, I guess
Jen.
as a parent, I felt like our parent conferences have helped to explain sort of where our child is, more so than I felt like the video or the paper. It's my understanding that parent conferences don't take place at the high school in the same way that they do in the middle school. Is that true, or is it maybe more optional? I just feel like those one-on-one conversations with the teachers can help explain more. Maybe that's where some of the disconnect is at the high school.
I mean, there are still conferences at the high school, and teachers are still comped time to make space for that. I'm not sure exactly what the differences are between the middle school and high school approach to conferences. Do you know more about that?
Well, the middle school's gone through a couple different iterations over the last few years, so I think there's still, the high school, I believe, has been fairly consistent, whereas the middle school has been changing a little bit. Last year, I think the TA, you had a conference with the TA. This year, you had a conference with 2 of your 4 team members. So they're continuing to try to find the right modality, I think.
And at the high school, you can meet with all of the teachers?
Yeah.
You sign up to meet with each
Yeah.
teacher you want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're going to be there soon.
I know I can't wait. What time? I'm fine right now. I just want to learn more about this stuff, but that unknown.
Yeah.
One of the other things that was interesting in the behavior versus, what's the other term?
Academic.
Yeah, I mean, separating those out. From a teacher's point of view, the frustration of the smart kid that doesn't turn in his homework, so to speak. And how do you separate those types of assessments as to this kid knows it, but he doesn't demonstrate it in a way that you and I would say, yeah, you got your work in on time, so you were a month late and you learned, that's great. But there's a negative to that other part of it too. I don't know how you grade that.
The rubrics in the middle years program have no space to record work habits, right? There's no, it was late, there's no excellent grammar unless it's, a language rubric. So the rubrics cause the teachers to actually measure student learning against these criteria. There's a separate space, and at the high school it's a work habits rubric where teachers can use that to report out on those habits of learning that you're describing. So my daughter, for instance, in 3rd grade, has very little, at Bristol, has very little homework. She has to read 20 minutes a night, and she's an avid reader. She reads a ton. She does not keep track of that homework folder, right? And I'm not nagging her, so she's frequently not bringing the signed thing in, and then she's having to make that up after the fact. To have that count against her reading scores would not be an accurate reflection of who she is as a learner.
Right.
We can instead pull that out and have a conversation about organization and follow through, right? And so there are 2 different things, and so in a proficiency-based system, we report about those separately. And it's hard because there's all sorts of ingrained habit of, I took 5 points off because it was a weekly, all of that. We also don't give extra credit in a proficiency-based system. There's no, like my tweet, you get 5 more points. There's none of that. Not that would have happened before. There's no random extra credit. Instead, there are extra opportunities to demonstrate proficiency. So maybe you're assessed on the same criteria repeatedly throughout a course, and maybe you scored really low once, a little bit better, then you just didn't even
do this assignment, and then you nailed it. Well, if I look at that, sort of professionally over time, I look at the trends in that data, I see evidence of learning, and I see evidence that you have demonstrated proficiency, and so that informs your score. This, you never did this assignment, but I already can see that you can do this work, that would affect your work habits. Is that?
Yeah, no, it's confusing, but thank you, it was a good explanation.
It's super confusing, and we're still learning our way into this. So one of the challenges that we have is consistent messaging. Making sure that teachers are first understanding these shared agreements commonly and then speaking about them similarly. That's why those teaching and learning guides were so critical, and why I think they'll continue to be critical as we continue to learn these practices and learn how to communicate about them well. Those are both posted online, by the way.
Great.
Teachers, parents, anybody can just look at those.
Great. It can also relate a lot to the subject matter, whatever it is, science versus reading and English appreciation or whatever. It's very different for different teachers and how they can do that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and we've talked about, we've had to be really thoughtful about what is the late work window and how do we set this reasonably, because it's different if it's a lab or a collaborative practice. And so the sort of what's tight and what's loose, what are we all agreeing to and where do you have freedom, those are all conversations that we've been having as we build this process.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you. So next up, yes, sorry.
Caitlin, how are the students taking this? I mean, this is kind of complicated. In the past, they would know, pass a certain number of tests, I put in my homework, I achieve a certain amount. But now that they're having to look at the criteria of the rubrics, are they taking advantage of opportunities to meet with their teachers to understand what those rubrics actually mean?
It's a really good question, and I feel far from that work to be able to answer it well. I think that our teachers are still learning this, and so our students are still learning this too. And I think that the reactions are probably pretty mixed, including a good deal of frustration. We have we heard from a parent earlier and from teachers how much attention middle school teachers have been giving to supporting students in their learning. And so I think that work is really happening there. And at the high school, we've got new structures with flex time and advisory. So if a teacher sees that a student is falling behind or needs help, he or she can call that student in during flex time and give more time and attention on task. So the space is in the schedule for that work to happen. And I don't know how consistently students are taking that specific opportunity.
I guess I'd love to hear from the students what they're in, how it's going for them.
Yes.
And how they're accepting this, understanding it.
As far as the middle school, interacting with the middle school students.
Usually at the end of the school year.
Yeah, it's at the end, yeah.
And we have an opportunity when we go to places like Mary Hogan, and those could be questions that we ask the kids then during their presentations as well. Any other questions? Caitlin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, report of the board. We have a few action items, which I'm sure I'm going to mess up this process. So the first on the agenda is to appoint Hannaford Career Center board representatives, which I believe we have 2 representatives who are more than excited to continue in their representation of Hannaford. Peter.
So, given, I think that was an excellent summation. So rather than have two nominations, I would just like to move that we appoint our current representatives, Lori Morris and Suzanne Buck, to another 1-year term on the Hannaford Career Center board. Along with that, some great appreciation from this board. Suzanne serves as chair of that board, which is a major time commitment. And Lorraine, as usual, serves on probably multiple committees, including negotiations, which is also very time-consuming.
By herself.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Say
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations.
And thank you.
And thank you. Yes, Peter.
Follow up, Suzanne's going to look into whether we are due to appoint a sort of at-large community member from our school district. That's for a multi-year term, and Suzanne's going to look into whether it's due, and that may have to come back to the board.
Okay, great, thank you. So next up, bank account resolution and invoice payment authorization. Peter, is this Brittany?
This would be Brittany, yes. Would you like to summarize this?
The bank account resolution is essentially a listing of our bank accounts and signers and how many signatures are required. The only changes this year are that we've closed 2 of our bank accounts. Prior to unification, we had separate checking accounts for Mums, MHS, and Mary Brogan Food Service. That sort of continued until January 1 of this year as like a vestige of our prior organization structure. It's not required that we keep those separate, so we've combined that into the general fund. Other than that, those are the only changes.
Great.
So we just need to take action on the signers listed.
Great. So a motion for the board to approve signers as listed, which I believe is noted as by title, not by
Correct.
name, correct?
In most cases, except for there's some high school, class of 1974 accounts that are assigned with specific people.
Great.
To make that motion.
Second, great. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Invoice payment authorization, Brittany?
Yeah, so the way that it stands right now, the authorization requires 2 members of the board, any 2 members, to read bills, basically. Often that's Chip and Victoria. So that's what we need to pay the invoices, and then they're reported on at each board meeting. So I recommend you continue with that practice. I think there's maybe a choice if you look at the way that the resolution is written, so I would advise that you choose any 2 board members.
Great. So we have a motion to continue the practice using any 2 board members to approve invoice payments and appropriate authorizations. So moved. Second? Second by Mary. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
We'll make one comment on that. In the old days, we didn't read them every week. We now read them every week, and there is some burden to that.
It's a high point, Chip.
Yeah, certainly is. But I'm just saying, that's why you need a lot of board members and consistency. If we're going to play this game, every week is different than twice a month or once a month, which is the way it was in years past before unification, and we're reading this for all the schools, so
Thank you.
point that out to the board.
Thank you. Next, as an action item, and Peter, I'm going to turn this over to you, Ripton real estate request.
So we were approached a number of months ago by the town of Ripton. As a town, they're seeking to move their salt shed, I think that's what it's called.
Yep.
And Amy, you can probably fill in some of the history here. From its current location to a location abutting the Ripton Elementary School land boundary. The initial plans had the salt shed abutting our property, but not making any entry into our property. They came back to us after we looked at the initial plotting of the salt shed and approved of it, which was required for us to give the approval for them to put the salt shed next to our property. They came back and said they had redrawn it, and part of them redrawing it has the salt shed and the area around the salt shed going into our property. And there's I believe a rationale for that Brittany can share or not.
I don't fully understand. I think it had to do with, egress and exit and then proper screening. I don't fully understand the desire, but I think it was for egress.
I can read what Allison just, our town clerk emailed to just provide a little more. And based on what we talked about at town meeting, and it's really more, it's just about aesthetics and trying to be mindful of its proximity to the school and noise and all of that. And just to give a little bit of the history, so last year, right now, the shed is right next to the river, and it's not a safe place in terms of the runoff. It's an area where it's been flooded for years. In fact, one of the articles that was voted on this year was some money to fix significant money to fix the culvert. Actually, it wasn't a warrant, it was a grant. But anyway, so the whole idea is to move that big sand pile, that salt pile, sand salt, whatever, and they had asked for volunteers for people to donate property that would work. And so the Dorias, who live right next to the school, were willing to donate this part of their property. So Allison said there are two questions to be addressed. One is the proposed boundary adjustment shown on the attached plan is the area in red. And then the intent is to allow for a greater amount of planting area for screening than would otherwise be, and meet setback requirements for the district.
Yeah, so there are both covenants. So the original request was related to the district releasing covenants, and then the additional request, I think, is 0.068 acres it's currently district owned, and so the request is to adjust the boundaries.
Right.
This is abutting the south side of the school property, sort of what I call parking lot side.
Yes.
And so if we granted the school property, are we granting it to the school, or are we granting it, are we granting it to the town or to the Dorias?
The town.
So the Dorias gave
the property,
giving
they
the rest
didn't
of it.
sell it, correct?
What's that?
The Dorias gave the property to the town, they didn't sell it.
I believe so, but I could be wrong. Peter?
What's the timing here? Are we in a hurry to need to do this for them? Does anybody know? The reason I ask is this, we don't have anybody from the town of Ripton really presenting this to us and really being able to answer our questions about screening and all of that, and the purpose of it. I'm wondering if would be better handled within the facilities committee. Not that they don't have plenty going on, but just to create a more flexible group that could, hear and just make a recommendation to the board.
I agree. I think the schools, maybe the school personnel can weigh in on how they feel like it might impact. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know what part, this could be the kindergarten classroom door for all I know, looking at this map. So I think it's hard for us to understand what's happening here.
I mean, it's the part that's in the woods. It's across from the school. So you might see it, but it's not near the classroom.
And is there any timing requirement that they share?
They have not indicated any. I let them know that this would be that I would touch base with them after the board meetings, and they haven't indicated any urgency, but I can definitely check.
Yes,
I have a question, and Bruce, you may be able to answer this. Is there any impact on the groundwater with all that salt?
Well, that question just came to my mind. I wasn't aware of the shed going up, so. Yeah, like Waybridge suffered a problem years ago where the salt shed soured their well. So I do not know the proximity of the salt sheds proposed and where our well is. That would be a concerning question. I'd want to have a geologist or a hydrologist look at it.
I thought when they redo the salt sheds now, you have to
It could be
find
that
out
it
the
meets.
floors underneath them and stuff.
Chip?
The other question would be, would they build the salt shed anyway if we didn't deed them this, I don't know how big, 0.06 acres, but that.
They had planned to.
But we still have to release the covenants, I think. I think there's two pieces. I think you'd still have to release the covenants in order for them to.
The covenant on,
As I understand it, have a covenant on part of the Doria property, is that right?
oh, well, that's different.
That's what I understand.
I sort of agree with Peter here that this seems to be a little, albeit it's convoluted, but, and probably not significant, but it is a case that I think we need a little more sort of information to be able to be sure that we're making the right move. I don't have a question we aren't, but I just find there's too many questions that I have.
Yeah, I would definitely want to make sure that we weren't compromising our well water.
There's a lot of things like that.
So perhaps a motion to move the discussion of the Ripton salt shed to the Facilities Planning Committee as an agenda item and get appropriate representation from Ripton to support the discussion.
I'll move that.
Second.
Maybe after we do some research too ourselves. I mean, bring in the town after we also look at the well.
Great, so a motion to move the question of the Ripton salt shed to the Facilities Committee, allowing for Ripton and the school district to do appropriate research to inform the discussion.
Move.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Next up is the Facilities Committee update.
I'm the last item. I'll make this quick.
Unless there's another.
So tomorrow, we have David scheduled to come at 5 in the high school to present the initial consolidation scenarios. I won't say much about them except that going into the meeting, I think we need to remember that the plan that we're building to is sort of a three-legged stool. And what we're seeing tomorrow is the facilities piece of it. And so the plans have been based on data gathered around building condition and suitability for sort of 21st century learning, site size and grade, utilities, location, cost. And the work that still needs to be done in the next month are going to be around the educational impacts, programming, operations, staffing, busing, all that sort of stuff.
Great.
Anything you want to add to that, or do you?
I have two questions. Do we think we'll be in a place where after that meeting, whatever message we want to ensure is communicated, like the three-legged stool, will there be a process in place that content can immediately get up on the school website?
Yeah, so tomorrow's meeting, MCTV will be there, and so that link will be posted in the morning along with the slide deck that we will all see.
Yes, and do we anticipate John Flowers or anyone to be there tomorrow?
I don't know. I anticipate public.
Yeah, so we should just be thoughtful about them, how we get him or whomever is representing there, duly informed. Chip?
Yeah, obviously, whenever you present four, or whatever there are, four, I don't know, whatever the
How many scenarios?
Yes, scenarios there are, suddenly this becomes exploded a little bit in a way that is not where the board would be at that time. So I think it's important for the public to understand that. But I don't know anything about them. I haven't seen them yet.
Right.
And so I will be seeing them for the first time too. However, as we've said all along, the plan is not dictated by one consultant. Okay, It's dictated by us as we compose all of this answer to this big question out of a lot of different data. And we could reject all of it, or we could accept tiny pieces of it in this whole composition we're trying to figure out. So you worry about it because I don't want it to be splashed on the paper or on whatever that says such and such is gone or such and such is going to be converted. We are nowhere near that particular.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely worried about it. This was warned as a committee meeting initially, and then I think with interest as it is, we opened it up to the full board so that they could see it at the same time as the public. But yeah, I'm worried about these options being presented and then misconstrued as this is a done deal. My preamble before David's presentation will talk about the fact that this is the first time the board's seen it, as well as that this is just one leg of the stool. But I think it's a necessary step, right? We all have agreed that the status quo is not sustainable, and so we got to start putting one foot in front of the other and see where that takes us. So,
and tomorrow we're just doing clarifying questions, right?
So tomorrow David will present, and then the board will have time to ask questions, and then we'll open it to public for clarifying questions around what has been presented by David.
And where I'm going with it is, when's the next opportunity for us to ask all the questions of all the information that we want that's not there, or to explore other scenarios, like what all the follow-up discussions that may, in fact, really change. And I want to make sure, and I'm asking because that can certainly be part of, initially before we even talk about the information, making sure that the public who is there understands the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that the board's discussion can be more robust and, dive into the information that they definitely want to see round out, that they feel that we need to have in order to round out the plans. So I think there'll be time for that, and then I think depending on how we're all feeling at the end of that, we can make more time after for board discussion. Any other? Yes, Peter.
I think it is important that not just a preamble, mid-amble, and post-amble.
Right.
I don't think you can emphasize those points enough.
And even if we don't know the specific points of community engagement or what it's going to look like, but again, part of that being
right. So we'll talk about we're gonna do a survey, which is yet to be created, but and then there'll be community engagement session in April. So we're working on creating it. Any other questions or comments for Victoria? Great, thank you. Anything under other? Yes, Lorraine.
I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the voters in our district who supported our budget and the Hannaford Cursor budget as well. We appreciate it.
Great point. Yeah, thank you. Yes, great point. Any other comments under other? Yes, Jennifer.
I don't like using other to talk about things that we're not quite prepared for. I just want to put out there that I am a bit concerned about what I heard from the middle school teachers and the letter before that. And I had asked to see if we could add something on the agenda about an update and didn't receive a response. So I'm just wondering if we'll have an opportunity to talk about that, if that's just something the central office is working on at this point, the non-negotiables. I'm not sure if the community knows, did not come from the board. The first I heard about them was from the letter, so just kind of figuring out where we stand with that, because they're way ahead of us as a board with where the proposal stands, and I don't feel like it makes the board look good because we don't know really what's happening at this point.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
So I sent the board an update on the process, in terms of where it is, and we're about halfway through the process. The team at the middle school is halfway through, so they worked on the plan with an initial group that went then to the larger faculty. The faculty weighed in. It's now going back to that smaller group to take recommendations from the larger faculty. One of the things we're doing, and one of the things I think I've been talking about over the last couple of years, is we're now at a point next year where we're in a state of having to cut each year to stay below the spending threshold. So if we sustain a two-team model at the middle school, we are necessarily going to have to increase our elementary class sizes and our high school class sizes to sustain that. We've been talking about the ratio at the middle school for quite a long time. Since I got here, for 7 years, we've been talking about declining enrollment at MOMS, and the challenge of doing anything when you have a team structure, you can't reduce 1 or 2 positions. As you lose 20 students, you can't shrink that in the same way because the teams are set structures. So it's been something that we've been talking about, I think, and living with for a long time. We're currently looking at ratios across schools, like total ratios of licensed staff to students across middle schools in Vermont. If you look at the kind of quote-unquote non-negotiable number that we put out, I believe it's fairly close to, and Brittany has some of that data, it's fairly close or lower than many other schools in Burlington, South Burlington, etc. So as a starting point, I don't think, that number just didn't come from, well, let's just try something. We're trying to do this kind of systematically and thoughtfully. One of the things that was raised that I think we're going to have to look at and talk about is they were saying the Mills classes, those were the core, they used to be called core. Those classes are the same length as world language and other courses, and I think that the group that worked on creating the initial plan was trying to create more balance. I think they mentioned that in the letter, trying to create more balance across courses. That's something that I think they're going to continue working on over the next months as they figure out where can we flex. The number that was mentioned in terms of 120 student load per teacher and what EQS states, EQS is built around you weight all the core, you don't weight the other courses. You can have much higher class sizes in the other courses, according to EQS. So, the language states 100 students, and these are guidelines. EQS is guidelines for schools. 100 for core classes, and then for non-core classes, and they use examples in EQS, they say like art, music, can have higher total student load per teacher. So that's just one of the things, I think, just in looking at what is the model that we want to build, 6th through 8th, that would align with our values. I think that's one of the things that we'll be continuing to look at. So that's kind of overall where nothing is set in stone. We have plenty of time between now and really kind of November, December to continue working on this. It's good that it's happening now, and some of the harder decisions are happening now too. There's no, as we go into the next budget cycle, I think we're going to have to partly rely on data as we look across all of our schools, because there are no easy places to reduce staff. And so I think as a community, the more that all of us can understand the data, I think the better it is. So it doesn't seem like, well, this is fair or that's not fair. I think the more transparent we can be, the more open we can be, and there are some decisions that I think the board needs to make, and the decisions that we need to, all of us need to make as we look at, with limited resources, where do we weight those resources, and where do we take from, and where do we move it, and that's the work that we need to do.
Quick question. So are the teachers maybe not aware? It feels like their letter came from a place where they feel like this is already done.
Well, the model was, to begin the construction of the model, those were the parameters set on it.
No, I know.
Let's create this because we hadn't reduced the team for all this time. That was the initial parameters that were put on it, and like I said, when you look comparatively across other schools, it's more or less in line. We can share that data with all of you.
Right. It just feels
That's
like
not. I'm not saying. I'm not saying that is right necessarily, but if we choose to keep class sizes very low at the middle school, which I would love. I would love to do that across the board. But if we do that, we have to acknowledge that we have to get comfortable with 25 in the elementary level, or get rid of some programming at the high school. We can't do everything. And so I think that's the part where I think the more we can be transparent about all of the data, and we can look exactly at all of our staffing, and even look at administrative staffing and what our percentage is, and all of that, I think that at least helps everybody to come at it from the same information, which I think is helpful.
Suzanne?
So I'm just wondering, thinking about people here, sitting here, and you've been very patient and everything. Could we maybe put this on the docket for a presentation for later on? I, for one, I believe someone told me tonight that I never received the letter because they couldn't find me in the door. I haven't moved. I've lived in the same house for 30 years, but they couldn't find me.
The letter came to us first, Emily, in our mailbox.
Yes, I never received it in my mailbox. So I would just, I think.
You've gotten it since then, though, right? Have you gotten a copy yet?
No.
Okay. We can get you a copy.
So, just in the essence of time, I think if we put it on the agenda for our presentation, we come with some really decent questions. Because, the other piece they talked about was space, so, we could keep picking apart that letter and stay here all night, but I think it would be actually had a presentation.
My sense is it would be better for that group to continue working on the model before we do a presentation. I think a presentation after that next iteration of the model and the plan would be really helpful.
Great. All right. Any others? Yes, Peter.
We normally would reorganize committees. I realize our singing board has returned after the election, so I think it might be, we can take it up at our next meeting, but maybe send you any desires or wishes.
Great. Folks could send their desires or wishes with regards to committee placement. That would be awesome. Right?
I would just say from my experience as chair in the last year or two, the committees have been very great.
You'll make a great committee chair.
Yeah. I think there might be an opening in facilities.
I am a committee chair.
Negotiations can't change.
All right. And a
If you'd like to join us, we meet every other Monday for 4 hours. You're welcome to join us.
Thank you, everyone. A motion, I believe, to adjourn is required.
Yes, so moved.
Great.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All in favor?
Anybody want to oppose that?
They live?
No, thank you.